Greetings, Scott Tipton here from Blastoff. Time for part 2 of our interview with Tad Stones. This week we'll be talking about his long career at Disney. Enjoy!
Did you feel a sense of accomplishment when you started working at Disney? Did you feel like, well, this is sort of kismet, this is where I'm supposed to be?
Well, it was, yes, or where I wanted to be. But what was different is, actually going back to college, you asked about art school. I was an art student for like my freshman year, maybe in my sophomore. But again, I had these English, in fact, I think it was just freshman year. I had these English teachers saying, no, you should, be an English major. And they came up with a new major called Humanities. And from the description, it felt like a kind of design your own major, which were starting to be the cool thing in California at that time. But it just seemed like I could do writing and art. That was the plan. The weird thing is I ended up doing a lot of 3D art. I was a teacher's assistant in ceramics. I never took a painting class. So it's all the classes that I could have done, those were never on my schedule, and I never ended up taking a writing class. I ended up taking a bunch of old English, stuff. Other than the suite mate of my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was the daughter of Exitencio, a Disney designer, both at Imagineering and at the studios. And because of her, I actually learned about what was the Disney training program back then, which was just one guy, Eric Larson, and got me to, I had a place to submit my stuff and got my job at Disney. Again, randomly, but getting back to it, when I was at Disney, it was like, yes, I'm here, but first you had this training thing, and your training was basically, you had to do a test of something moving, something animated for, I believe, 4 weeks, and then if you survived that one, and you were judged by basically the 9 old men of Walt, not exactly, but that crowd, you did another 4 weeks. So you're trying to learn animation while you're trying to animate. And so the first time I showed, or my second test, it was when Ron Clemens showed his third test, the one that he had done after he'd been there for a while, which was this glorious thing with Cruella de Vil. And so everybody said, well, here's the 2 masters. They went right to Ron to talk to him. And it wasn't until like 6 months later that I found out, oh no, they really liked your thing too. Glenn Keane started like just a few months after me, so this was a great time there.
Yeah.
But a year or 2 went by, and I was constantly coming up with ideas for these personal tests that you had to do in your spare time to get ahead. And I always had better ideas, so I started things. And then one day, I looked at an old test. I said, God, I put a lot of work into this. It was Madame Mim and Merlin, and she turned into a snake, and there was different stuff going on. And the manager of the department happened to walk by. So I'm at the Mobile, and I said, hey, could you take a look at this? I'm just wondering if you think this is worthwhile for me to finish up and show the review board. And he went, yeah, no, definitely, you can show it just like that. Yeah, wow, we had kind of given up on you. Maybe someone could have mentioned, like, hey, are you working on anything? We haven't seen anything over a while. But it was like, that actually got me classified as an assistant animator. I felt like I, dodged a very large bullet. But then a little time went by and I realized, no, I enjoy the process of animation. I love flipping drawings on a desk more than even seeing it on film, because you're literally seeing your drawings come alive. But I realized I was more interested in figuring out what the characters should do than making them do it. I said, that's the definition of story. And I did some, work to move over into story. And I was in the story crew of Fox and the Hound. That was when I made it over there. Unfortunately, they switched directors there, and that was back when there was only like 3 cards of credits. Not everybody got credit, and they gave a fictional worm a credit, but they didn't give me a credit. And someone was saying, well, they decided to give you credit. Yeah, but it's a good picture. I really like that sequence where the hunter is setting traps with Copper the dog. I said, yeah, it's my sequence. You know, and it's just like, but, you know, then with Black Cauldron on, everybody got credit.
Isn't that funny?
But it was still, you know, again, you're not in it for the credit per se. It was just fantastic. I so much enjoyed coming up with stories, you know, and you know, I did some educational stuff, and then I got a chance to work at Imagineering, designing rides. I got to work in a room with Ward Kimball for 9 months, hearing all of his stories. That was like living with a time machine.
You talk about like this segment, you're watching this movie with your little kid and you're going, wait, I wrote that, and now somebody else wrote that.
No.
In Imagineering, like, what rides can you say I had a hand in that particular design?
And have a hand in
the story behind the ride.
Have a hand in is true for almost all parts of animation and certainly ride design, because so many people work on and film. Every frame has many artists and a director,
right,
and you know, layout artists and backgrounds and in-betweeners. So it's, you know, yes, you can get a cell and say, okay, that's my drawing. Well, except that this guy cleaned up my drawing, so it's not quite my drawing. I do have one animated scene in The Rescuers. If you watch the original Rescuers, Bernard Mouse is tiptoeing across the desk and a cuckoo clock goes up. That's
you.
And it was one of those things where they gave it to a guy to clean up, and that was, you know, he was an old school guy who wasn't quite fond of these new young whippersnappers coming up, so he didn't really give it a clean up. So it's like, oh well, at least I'm in there. No, I mean, everybody, you know, in rides, I worked on the imagination. Well, with Ward, I did the transportation pavilion.
Right.
The World of Motion, I think it was called. That since has been taken out. But it was like a Pirates of the Caribbean style ride, except you're going through time and there's just gags of, here's the guy who came up with the round wheel, unlike the guy who's got a square wheel and a triangle wheel, and there's the train hold up, and Ward was such a huge train fanatic. And then big showpiece was the first car accident in San Francisco, and you know, again, Ward was remembering stuff out of his childhood, and you're talking about this ice van that was pulled by a horse, and then here's the car, and you know, it was just, that was a lot of fun. But it's, like I say, it's no longer there. And then I worked on the Imagination Pavilion with Tony Baxter, one of the chief designers at Disneyland and the Disney Company, and worked with Dreamfinder and Figment, and I remember at the end of that, they pulled me to go back to the studio to work on these Epcot documentaries that ultimately weren't done. And Tony said, you're going to miss the fun part. The fun part is we are actually building this thing and sculpting. On the other hand, it turned out, it's like, no, it wasn't so fun because they had to completely redesign the ride, you know. And it was like, but eventually I ended up, you know, back in feature animation, just a little before the time Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Frank Wells came to the company.
Kind of an interesting time.
It was,
wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, it was fun in that up to that time, Disney was almost run like an English manor. In that you had guys who were keeping the estate going, and then they would go off on a hunting trip or whatever, and then you had managers who, you know, kept the hedges clipped and stuff like that. They only put out 3 movies a year. I'm talking live action movies, you know, and an animated movie every 5 years. When Michael and the new people came in, they loved movies. It was just, you know, you say, oh, Suits and versus creative people. These guys loved movies, especially Jeffrey. That was their passion, so they're constantly doing it. And Michael also came in and said, Disney is the top name in animation. It should be everywhere that animation is. It doesn't mean you're going to do interstitials for Sesame Street that look like feature films, but if we choose to do that, it should be the best of that stuff. Not that they ever talked about doing that, but although years later they find.
Right.
So that was an exciting time for a whole different reason. Suddenly it was just like, yeah, we're doing stuff, and you know, again, you know, we created a bunch of movies that created, you know, and, well, reinvigorated an art form. And you know, for me, they decided to get into television. And the first week that Michael Eisner was at the company, I was actually on vacation, and I got a call from the guy who's head of, say, merchandising, I think a different name there. But he says, I know you're on vacation. I know it's going to be a Sunday, but we would like to have you come and be part of this discussion about moving animation to television. And they knew me because I had done these little presentations for them, animator presentations, and where they expected just little written things, I did, you know, came in with a whole, you know, ink and marker and, you know, storyline all fleshed out. And in fact, the writer was there, said, okay, I'm gonna just put my stuff away here now. And he was totally enthusiastic about that. So that had stuck in their minds. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm gonna come and meet the brand new president at his house in Bel Air, you know, and went there, and there was only like, you know, 10 people there or something like that, maybe less. We, you know, Jim Magon, who went on, did Gummy Bears and Tailspin, he was there, and he said we should make t-shirts that said 1/10 of the most creative minds in Disney, because in some later article, they talked about that meeting of, got the 10 most creative minds at Disney to brainstorm about this, and it's like, sure, I'll take that.
Right.
And there we pitched. I pitched like a Mickey Mouse science fiction idea, and Eisner was he said, no, we have to protect Mickey for a while. We know we can do this, we can do things like that. So they were very protective of the animated heritage of Disney. But that gave, and actually that was it. We discussed, the big thing at that meeting was Michael Eisner said his kids were crazy about this candy from Germany called Gummy Bears. He says, do a show called Gummy Bears. It's going to be a hit, because that's the new craze then. And I remember saying in his parking lot off his house, when we were kind of talking about what had gone on, I said, man, he seems sharp. Those are good ideas. He said the right things. And, you know, except that idea about gummy bears. That's like doing pepperoni people or something. And as a matter of fact, because Jim was the one who had to develop that, very early on it was like Candyland. It was like, you know, the villain was Licorice Whip or something like that. And they were even thinking of, at the end of every episode, we're going to have to talk about dental hygiene, like He-Man used to come on at the end of his thing. So that's how different it was. And that wasn't working. And I don't know if they actually pitched that and it got shot down, or but Jim and Art Vitello were the two guys who basically came up with the Gummy Bears, and that started Disney on their way. They had that, and the Wuzzles were their first two TV shows, and had they had a third one, they would have sold a third show, because every network wanted it. And they called every network, and they met with them in the order that the networks called back. So that the one, ironically, the one network that didn't get a show was ABC, which of course later bought by Disney.
Yes.
So bought by the guys in that room. But that's
bought by the company that sold it.
Yeah, exactly. I went back to features, and at that time I was going to the World Science Fiction Convention every year, and these are science fiction writers I met in our Epcot development, because for a while we were working on a space pavilion, and I met Joe Haldeman and Gordon Cooper and you know, the guys who was president of Northrop, just having these brainstorm. Gerard O'Neill, who came up with the idea of L5 space colonies. And we divided up and they brainstormed what the future would look like and stuff like that. And I got to know some of those guys. I just felt like, because at this point now I'm kind of wandering, because I had pitched something to Jeffrey. They said no as a feature. I said no. And I just thought, I don't know, I'm in sync with this here. You know, I want to be more creative again. I want to tell stories. Maybe I should if I could storyboard and make my salary in 40 hours, then anytime outside of that, I could work on science fiction short stories and things like that, feed my soul kind of thing. And I happened to run into Michael Webster, who was the head of TV animation, president of TV animation, I believe was his title at the time. I said, hey, do you guys have any freelance storyboard work? Because I'm maybe interested in trying that. And he said, suddenly he perked up. He said, oh, well, you should come and visit our little studio. I had forgotten that they wanted me day one, but as a features. And I show up, Michael shows me around, except he's saying, you don't want to be a storyboard person. And yeah, Ted will be coming over here soon. I go, I am, or whatever, I'll just go with the flow. It was a very small, studio at that time. And he, made it all sound good. I met with Gary Kreisel, who really founded the TV division, and he went on to be president of it. Kind of made me an offer and everything. I met with Jeffrey, and Jeffrey said, hey, it's not a one-way street, if it doesn't work out, but they could really use you over there. It's like, okay, and went over there in my short time as a manager of creative affairs. But basically, they wanted me to take pitches from outside, which I did, except I was always uncomfortable basically getting a guy to do a full pitch and presenting that, and there was no pay involved, which now I know that's how Hollywood works.
Yeah.
But there was a gong show coming up, and gong shows were famous that we had one that featured with Michael and Jeffrey, where everybody's supposed to come in with 3 ideas, sit around a big table on a Saturday, and just tell your idea, and just gong, move on. And it was just, and I remember Joe Ranft, the late Joe Ranft, was there pitched, what was the title of the comic? Bill Reed, the World's Angriest Milkman or something?
Oh, you're talking about, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, whatever. Google
yeah. It was Reed.
Yeah.
It was Reed Fleming.
Reed Fleming, that's it. I forgot the phrase of the milkman. Anyway, he pitched that, and they were actually interested in that, although they said that could be a live action thing. And
that would have been really strange.
Yeah,
but
really strange coming out of Disney at that time. The other notable thing at that meeting is, because my friend Ron Clemens was right there, he pitched The Little Mermaid and didn't get really through his pitch, and they said, that's a great idea, but you guys just did it. You did Splash, the live action film with Daryl Hannah. He said it was a great film. And then Ron, who's kind of a quiet guy, still tried to say, well, this is a little different. And they said, no, you've done it, let's move on. I think the other show he pitched at that time, that was finally done decades later, Treasure Planet was at that first meeting too, and they didn't go forward on that one because they had just come from Paramount, and they said, there's talk at Paramount of rebooting Star Trek with young cadets, and they were talking about using Treasure Island as kind of a template for a story, so let's stay away from that. Luckily for the industry, we didn't get through everybody's ideas, so they had us hand in everything, and Ron handed in his Little Mermaid pitch, and they realized, oh wait, this is an entirely different film,
right?
And turned into something. But anyway, I had a gong show coming up at TV Animation, and it's like I didn't have all the pitches necessary, kind of a couple, and so Jim came up with some ideas, and I think we pitched 22, 23 ideas, and we were talking one-liners. Miami Mice, which was actually one, which then later on, very soon was a comic. They fight crime and they're mice. Obviously came back. And out of like 23 or whatever ideas, I'd come up with 18. And in fact, but leading up to that, they sat down with me and said, Ted, you're really supposed to be getting ideas from outside. We're concerned that you're coming up with a lot of these yourself. I said, okay, well, I'll try. And it's like they walked out the door. I'm going, looking at the calendar. Gong show's there. I need more stories, you know. I had no one to call up and that sort of thing. Third season of Gummies, NBC wanted to switch things up, and I got a chance to story edit third season of Gummies, and then was named a co-producer by the end of the season. I was working with Alan Zaslav, and then the two of us went on to do Chippendale's Rescue Rangers and Darkwing Duck, and then Alan went off to work with other people, and you know, I went on to do Hercules and you know all the direct-to-videos and you know, Buzz Lightyear and so on and so forth.
Come on back next time as Tad and Judd talk about Tad's most famous project at Disney, Darkwing Duck. And make sure to check out BlastoffComics.com and our North Hollywood location for books from the Tad Stones collection. Thanks for watching.